I have the pleasure to introduce our keynote for this morning. And this is also going to be, there's also going to be part of a World Cafe. So there'll be some questions on your tables in front of you, which will form part of our World Cafe exercise during this session. So I'm going to invite up Dr. Eileen Kennedy and Professor Diana Laurillard to present our keynote. And I'll hand over to them, and then I'll come back when we're moving to the World Cafe session.
Thank you. And I want to thank you again for the invitation to this conference. It's always a great delight to talk to this group because of the range of shared ideas I think we have. And I noticed in the conference yesterday that the focus is very much on undergraduate teaching and learning. And we're going to go a bit beyond undergraduates to once they've left the university and they become professionals. So could we, oh, I can advance this, can I? Okay. That's okay, we're there. So that's why we've called it collaborative professional development as a key to inclusive learning, inclusive being one of those many words that Linda wants us to address. So we begin at the largest possible scale. This conference is talking about learning everywhere. Well, you can't get beyond global, at least not yet. And that's where we're going to begin with the global context for change and the UN SDGs, and then we'll come to the how. And after about 10 minutes, I'll hand over to my colleague, Eileen Kennedy. So given that we're thinking about universities' role in the UN SDGs, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of role can universities play here? Obviously, for our student population, we are preparing the students of tomorrow. But as far as their work is concerned, there are many professionals already trying to grapple with these kinds of ideas. And when you think about it, UN SDG 4 for universal lifelong learning actually underpins all the other 16 SDGs, all of those professionals. And I don't think there's a single professional in the world who is really out of the loop on this. Everyone has a responsibility. At least think about the climate crisis. So there is the problem that what quality education and lifelong learning means is somehow enabling professional groups all over the world, wherever they are, whatever kind of area they work in, and I don't think anyone is spared this. So what responsibility do we have as universities? We certainly say a lot about this in our mission statements. UCL, I'm not going to quote anybody else's, everybody's got one of these, but ours says something about being engaged with the wider world and committed to changing it for the better, for the long-term benefit of humanity. Well, that's grand and ambitious, and that's great. And we are a university which is luckily usually in the top 10 or 20 world rankings for excellence. Now, what about our impact? Our impact especially on the SDGs. Well, there's another ranking now, and that's the THE World Rankings of Universities for Impact on the SDGs. And there, we don't even get a mention. I mean, we're somewhere in the hundreds, you know, they can't even pin a particular number on it. This was from the 2022 data, and this is a university that actually thinks about this. We do have policies, we do have strategies. We try to make sure that we're doing something, at least as far as the university itself is concerned. But what about our mission statements? And we're not alone. No universities in the top 20 for overall rankings for excellence are also in the top 20 for impact rankings. It seems that we can't do both excellence and impact on the most important challenges facing the world today. Now, what is this measure? How do they say you're not doing that well? What sorts of impacts are they measuring? Well, these are the lifelong learning measures they look at for every university. Access to educational resources, all these are online, of course, and you'll get the slides. Access to educational resources for those not studying at the university, so that would certainly be professionals. Educational activities that are open to the general public, such as lectures or specific courses. Educational events that provide vocational training, that pretty much includes everybody as well, for those not studying at university. And educational outreach activities in the local community, including schools. policies to ensure that these activities are open to all, regardless of ethnicity, religion, disability, immigration status, or gender. So again, focusing on the inclusive. All right, well, there's millions of people out there need this. So to what extent are we actually managing to do this? So of course we do professional development, and everybody's got a professional development program. And the results from UUK tell us that we do training and upskilling, and every year we contribute some 4 million training days to our professional population in the UK. If you cost that generously at £500 a day, that's £2 billion a year. Well, that's a good sum of money. But put that in the context of the overall numbers. Employers are investing 42 billion, and that won't be enough, you can be fairly sure, including the wage costs of those on training in skills in 2019. So by those measures, we're contributing just over 4.5% to the training and upskilling of the workforce. And there we're talking about training and upskilling of the workforce. And that's not thinking beyond what they currently need to what they're going to need to meet these massive challenges. We might ask ourselves, is it really our job? Why should we be contributing so much to professional development? Well, more collaboration between university and professional communities would help the UK to adapt more quickly to changing needs, and indeed the world in general. Because it's universities who are generating the research findings that we really need if we're going to upgrade and improve the quality and reach and impact of professional activities and our practices. And universities do have the technology. We're all highly digitized. We invented MOOC platforms, and MOOCs are certainly global platforms for teaching and learning. And while we would not advocate them for undergraduate learning, except within the hands of a teacher guiding students through their use of a MOOC, nonetheless, for large-scale professional development, they're ideal because those professionals are very knowledgeable people. They know a lot, and they are very good participants in a well-organized and well-designed MOOC, as we will try to explain. So what we're advocating is an SDG professional development strategy that would match our glorious mission statements and incidentally improve our impact rankings, and that's one of our keys to inclusive learning. So this is not really training and upskilling we're talking about. I think this is not about what it takes to do your job now. This is what it takes to move on beyond that, to achieve these huge ambitions for the world. So changing professional practices, this is the how that we want to talk about. So in the but how that Linda mentioned right at the start, this is what we're trying to cover now. We have to address these global challenges in climate crisis, health, inequality, poverty, whichever area it is. And every research area has the part to play in that. And every professional needs to be engaged. So I don't see any alternative than to use something like these large-scale educational platforms like MOOCs that we now have. But we don't use them in the conventional way. We have developed something which we call a co-MOOC, a co-designed massive open online collaboration, because these people, our participants, are very knowledgeable people. So we may articulate our own research findings, put them forward as being something helpful to achieve these ideas, and with activities for people to engage in those. But we also make sure there's social learning in there. And that's why we use FutureLearn so much, because it's a good platform for social learning. And you want contributions from those professionals. So it wants to be a dynamic conversational process. And that's the way we'll get that leading to collaborative research on practice and community knowledge building about how we achieve those main goals. So what do we mean exactly by a co-MOOC? What does it offer? Well, obviously it's going to offer video case studies, and we get those from research, and by co-designing the case studies that we're offering to people about other people's solutions. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're doing something that's of interest to how you do things differently in a community that's struggling with energy policy, for example, or in this case with a refugee community that's struggling with teaching, then see how other people are doing it and share those good examples. And that's one of the aspects of co-design. Or in a course, a MOOC on perioperative medicine, go where the people are actually doing it in those places, see what they do, and share that knowledge. And then with sustainable energy, for example, we have a discussion online where you bring those local experts in. They're the people trying to deal with these solutions, and they're in the process of thinking about how to do this, looking at research results, and challenging the research results very often, talking about what they're doing. And then they've got to have practice, and they will be doing their own research. So if we want to support them doing their own research, then we might do something like devise your interview questions, and then you share them on a Padlet, and then you discuss each other's interview questions. And it's another discursive collaborative learning process. If we're talking about peer review, that's an incredibly valuable way of dealing with professional development, because you've got knowledgeable people evaluating what you're doing. And every time you do a peer review, as every single person in this room will be aware, you learn something because you think about how you do things that this person you're now reviewing is doing. It makes you think differently about your own work. So whether you like the peer review feedback you get or not is not the whole story. It's what you've experienced in doing a peer review yourself that's important. So we provide guidelines for that over a few steps in the MOOC, and that's another discursive collaborative development process. In one of our courses on learning design, we use our learning designer tool to invite people when they've got a good learning design and it's been evaluated by peers to say, this is very good, this should be, more people should know about this. Then we curate those. We go through another phase of our review. So it's a little bit like the model that we have in scientific and scholarly journals, where you review each other's work and then an editor takes an overall look and says, yes, we'll publish this on a much smaller scale. But it's for everybody, this. Everybody can contribute to this and get that kind of feedback and that kind of representation of what they've done in a public space. So it's a way of having public access. And if you can read any of these, there's a wide range of different education sectors, from schools to professional education, undergraduate education, and so on, and a wide range of subject areas. But what's common to them all is the nature of the pedagogy and how we're using the technology and how you embed that in your teaching. So this is an opportunity for building community knowledge and changing practice. We don't know it all. Our research can't cover everything. We can offer the good bits, which really could make a difference, but we've got to hear back from those people as well. So the reach of these MOOCs, they are large scale. They do reach tens of thousands of people. So it is achieving something even without us having any kind of marketing or ministry help to take them further. So it is achieving a lot. And for each one of those people, they're affecting their own colleagues because of the way we've built this kind of process. So to wrap up my bit, I'm just going to take you through the 5 stages of our co-design theory of change, because a theory of change means you've got some idea about how you're going to carry on doing this. It's not just this project, it's what happens after. So we have a 5-stage process. The engage process, we collaborate with the stakeholders we're trying to reach. We find out their stories, their needs. And for example, in our community-based research project, we will have case studies from them. We collaborate with the professionals. In this case, it's a group of teachers who are teaching in refugee communities in Lebanon. And we work with them in the most challenging context to work out what they can do with technology. Because if you can do something well in the most challenging context, that's probably going to be good for absolutely everybody. So they are very inclusive. And then we extend that process by bring them all into the MOOC, contributing their local solutions to the community, and a variety of this is, I think it's a Menti collaboration. And then as part of the process, they can embed the resources in the MOOC within their own local blended learning activities for teachers, because not all teachers can join into that global community. Teachers are fantastic at helping each other, but some of them are very shy with these kinds of technologies. But if you've got a local blended way of seeing with other people in the room with you how this can all work, it makes a huge difference. And then the final phase is sustain. This has got to last beyond our project funding. So that's an iterative process. Each time we go around this loop, each stage feeds back into the preceding ones. And in this case, for example, we're handing over to an NGO in the Bekaa Valley, where they are taking that MOOC into their own teaching. So now I want to hand over to my colleague, Eileen, who will take us through those stages of how the pedagogy and the methodology blend together.
Thank you, Diana. So Diana's been talking about what we do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology, really, I suppose, that we use, and to delve a little bit deeper into the co-MOOC model. There are two things that we considered to be like non-negotiables for, calling something a MOOC, to say a co-MOOC, that you're making a co-MOOC. It has to be designed for social and collaborative learning, and it has to be co-designed with the professionals that it targets. And I want to explain a bit why we think these features are so important. The first thing is that social and collaborative learning, we think, is key to quality online learning. And when we talk about quality, we're not talking about the idea of the institution's commitment to quality that they often talk about, because that doesn't really tell teaching staff really how to do it. We're talking about how we create quality in terms of pedagogy. And for professionals, social and collaborative learning is key. It's key because they are able to learn from each other, and they can share their learning, share what they're doing back with other professionals. And what we really believe is that social collaborative learning, if we do that well, we design that well, it can work online, not just in the small scale, but on the large scale too, for tens of thousands of participants. During the pandemic, we learned that really teachers and learners both wanted the same thing. They wanted that interaction between the teacher and the learner, and learners in each other. And that's really also key to a caring approach to teaching online. So that's central to us, and we think it's incredibly important for professional learners. So we try to create that by embedding tools like Padlet, for instance, like this one here, that enables the participants to share knowledge. And in this case, it's about knowledge about how digital tools can support different types of learning. And that kind of creates a vibrant learning community, and it means that participants are excited to join, and it creates opportunities for meaningful social learning. But one of the things that is also really critical, that it seems like it's really simple, but really is not done enough in open online courses, is to create meaningful discussion prompts that enable people to have discussions that are fruitful. And I've interviewed a lot of professionals about their learning on open online courses, and they've all said that like discussion is so important. They want to be able to learn from each other. So this is what a discussion prompt looks like in one of our co-MOOCs. We start with a kind of low risk activity to encourage participants to engage with, because it can be scary to write something in a discussion, even if it's like a small group. But when you're thinking about writing something that lots and lots of people around the world can see, so we start maybe with a word cloud, and then we ask them specifically to talk about their usually sharing some example of their practice, maybe connecting a concept with their practice, and then they share their ideas, and they can support each other's learning. But sometimes we have to go beyond that, and Diana just mentioned that not everybody is going to be able to learn online entirely on their own. So, you know, we need to augment that kind of social learning through blended or hybrid learning. I think it's probably most important for less experienced online learners, people who find it difficult to get online, who lack digital confidence or motivation to engage with the co-MOOCs. But what's really important is that how to design that blend we see as part of our research as well. And we've been experimenting with different approaches to designing sort of in-person support, whether that's, you know, synchronous online support with asynchronous engagement with the co-MOOC, or in-person synchronous activities. For instance, recently we've just finished a blended, what we call a blended co-MOOC for Lebanese university MA and PhD students. We had about 55 of those students join us for a series of webinars around the co-MOOC community-based research. One of the reasons for doing that is that Lebanon has experienced a number of different crises over the years, and Lebanese University is the only public university that had suffered, you know, in those crises to the extent where they have very few hours of electricity, and because of the energy crisis, students find it difficult to travel in. So we wanted to sort of help them, support them in their research, and also encourage them to sort of engage with research in their own context. And you can see from the evaluations here that what the students are pointing out here is the key things that we need to think about when we're designing blended learning. About, you know, they say that the blended part enhanced the engagement, but they could have virtual connections with people through the co-MOOC. They enjoyed real-time discussions. But this quote at the end, the success of a blended learning format depends on how well it's implemented and how effectively the online and in-person components complement each other, is exactly right, isn't it? That's and sometimes we think these things are easy. They're not easy, and I think that it's important to get that right. But the second thing that we think is terribly important is this idea of co-design. And co-design can mean different things to different people. It can mean, you know, sometimes just consulting people, or it can, you know, mean actually building the learning experiences together. And that means that there's different roles for different people within that. Not everybody is going to do the same. And it's actual work. So we can't always just like say, okay, well, over to you now, you build it. So we have to work. We have sometimes make the most of very limited opportunities to work with people. Recently, we moved our work to Thailand. The idea was to promote a kind of global South-South collaboration. We wanted to take some of those insights that we learned from Lebanon and you know, help people in a different context engage with these ideas. On the northern border of Thailand, there were an awful lot of migrants and refugees from Myanmar. And in that context, like every refugee context, there's a shortage of teachers. What happens is that you get teachers that aren't really are not trained teachers, maybe not we haven't got a very high level of education themselves, but they see engaging in teaching as really community service, not a profession as such. There are limited opportunities for professional development and lots of different schools doing different things. And there really isn't that recognition of the teaching experience as a profession. As I say, there's no they haven't got credentials, and as a result you get a really high level of turnover of teachers, which means you're constantly having to sort of educate new teachers as they come in. So the communities there suggested to us that co-MOOCs would really work very well. So we've been to Thailand on two occasions to run a co-design workshops. There's some images from the last workshop that we ran. So we started, for instance, with a kind of dreams and nightmares activity where these are just the post-its there. You can these are just a couple of examples of what people were writing, because it gives us an idea of like the kinds of things that they really want from the co-MOOC experience and the things that they're worried that might happen. So that enabled us to have a sense of what we were going towards. And then we co-designed the curriculum, as you can see with these post-its, the sort of topics that they thought that were important to cover. We also had you spent some time co-designing the blended experience, and what we came up with was really quite a sophisticated and complex model of engagement and various modes of engagement. But we didn't want to lose everything that we got from Lebanon, and so we had a process of taking what we'd already designed and seeing if we can make connections between the sort of local examples for what people are doing in the Thai Myanmar border area, and we mapped those onto the existing co-MOOC. And that was also important, I think, for thinking about how can we start developing people's skills and through the transformative education sort of philosophy that we have. And we then went online and started creating content, and some of the different ethnic groups who have their own education sort of systems, schools, they took responsibility for different parts. We also created the idea of like profiles of different teachers that we hope to animate to help people navigate through the MOOC, because there's a lot of diversity within these areas. And one of the things ignore the one of the things that we want to do with this is to use the co-MOOCs to build towards an internationally recognized qualification, because you could see in those notes that was really very important. And so what we're doing is building a series of co-MOOCs, and with the idea that the participants at the end of those co-MOOCs could move on to engage with the PGCE teacher development, which is offered by University of London and taught by some of our colleagues at UCL. I mean, it's already run at about an eighth of the cost of a typical UCL qualification, but it will enable people really to get to degree level study through the co-MOOCs to the PGCE teacher development. And because after that, then they could potentially go on to even study at master's level. So we think that this kind of this pathway could easily be established through co-MOOCs to degree level qualifications, but we have to do it very carefully, and it's not going to be for everyone. It requires us to rethink how we offer qualifications, and we heard a bit about that yesterday. So, our challenge then to universities is how can we build more ambitious professional development? And what we're doing is investigating how we can do this with, emerging pedagogies and methodologies of co-design teaching and learning as collaborative research on practice, with emerging technologies of large-scale global online collaboration extended to professionals, potentially enhanced by AI, and internationalization of lifelong learning rather than, relying on this transnational movement of learners, which is a problematic model in many ways. So what we're going to do now is gain your input, hopefully. And we've got tables with 4 questions for you to consider in relation to these things. We want you to think about what groups could benefit most from co-designing blended, hybrid and high flex support for online collaborative professional development. We also want you to think about, could these co-design methods transform teaching and learning design into collaborative research on practice, and how? And what changes to the ways universities operate would provide pathways from professional development into professional education qualifications? And finally, what evidence would demonstrate the impact of online professional development for sustainability? So I think Linda's gonna, the questions are on your table. They're sort of color coded, so if you can see which one you want to talk about. But Linda's gonna organize that for you.
The conversations got so deep at the tables, we decided not to move you because there were some really good discussions going on. So thank you. There's some fantastic notes have been recorded and beautiful posters produced around the room. So what we're going to do now, and you can see on the screen over there that our online colleagues have been very much involved in the discussion as well. So what we're going to do now, Eileen and Diana are just going to invite colleagues in the room to feed in.
While we're waiting, can I just pick up one of the things that's on the Padlet? People are talking about who is this good for, what kinds of groups, and somebody's saying all kinds of groups. And I think that's true. One of the things that came up on our table was that very often you have in companies or organizations someone who is the person responsible for health or for what we do about climate change or whatever. And those isolated people, or it could be teachers in the school who's the one teacher who's there for special needs, they need other people to talk to. So especially those kinds of people, these collaborative groupings are really good. There's so many things on there and I can't read it from here. I'll go and take another look. Where's Anne?
So can we invite people who would like to respond from the room? Is there anybody who would like to sort of feedback from their table's discussion? Particularly Code Fellows, if you were chairing it, that would be helpful. We'll bring the mics to you. Oh. And then Donna, and then you third. Thanks.
So we had the question, what evidence would demonstrate the impact? And the first thing we thought about was the key challenge of keeping the meeting the local specificities of your learners and the challenge of scaling up internationally. So is it a massive online course or is it a spook, if we're reviving this term? It was important to retain the opportunity to have the flexibility to meet the learners in their context. And in terms of sustainability, we were thinking about how we should be leveraging existing resources and think about scalability. So maybe these would be train-the-trainers programs, which could then have more impact more widely. There would be research opportunities as the courses run, as more and more courses run, these uncovering common threads and looking at the impact, the long-term impact on participants. And we were thinking as well that professional development should be transformational, but it should also be recognized in the profession. And so there's this question of who is resourcing this initiative, and if there's an accreditation, the quality of the accreditation is important as well.
We also had the question about what evidence would demonstrate the impact of the professional development sustainability. And we thought in terms of internal and external evidence. So for internal evidence, we thought about qualitative and quantitative kind of feedback and data gathering. So user feedback, actual kind of numbers, post-course evaluation, and the need to kind of build all this kind of thing into the course design, as well as post-course. And also the need to track impact, which is a longer term thing. So tracking culture change and the impact on long-term knowledge, behaviour and activity in the actual institution. And in terms of external evidence, we thought in terms of making sure everything was aligned to external measures, publishing case studies of institutional change, and also social kind of impact assessments. So again, quantitative and qualitative, just kind of ways of demonstrating the impact on the actual people taking the course, but also the wider impact on the institution and how that aligns externally as well.
Thank you. I'll pick up. I have to say the previous table had far more practical suggestions than we have. We've gone down the philosophical route. So first of all, asking in terms of who determines what the impact is, in particular when we're looking at global south, if the global north are determining the impact measures, that doesn't seem quite philosophically aligned. And then looking maybe at the issues over reductionism, so where impact measures end up just being numbers. So how do we overcome that as well? So one of the things that I think was most interesting there was the idea that, I say this motion because I suggested it, the tension between the outcomes and goals of the course versus the outcomes and goals of individual learners going through professional development. Obviously, the co-design approach aims to address that because you're bringing that into the design process. But there's a particular epistemological framing that comes with that co-design approach. So maybe one of the measures of impact is actually if there's a power shift to the local leaders or the local people leading design, to bring that into their framing rather than it being something that is led by us.
Thank you for those contributions there. I mean, that's really helpful. I mean, sort of practical ideas of evidence, what kinds of external evidence like case studies that we could collect. Because I think that I think it's linked to I think the first table's a challenge over how do we fund these things. Like if we can provide evidence that these things are massively impactful, then I think the funding ought, you know, to follow that. I mean, governments have funding for these things. We need professionals to be equipped to deal with the challenges that we're facing. But I mean, it is enormously difficult to get that real evidence of change. And I think one of the ways that we're hoping to do it is to do that along with professionals themselves, working as citizen scientists, you know, sort of collecting data in their own classrooms. And I think that fundamentally then that is about, you know, sort of having people own the professional development and knowing the community, tracking the kind of benefits that they want and then making changes to make it better.
Thank you. Yeah, we too were looking at this issue of measures of impact, evidence demonstrating impact. And we shared some experiences of participants coming on training courses and professional development courses of quite a wide range, a variety of contexts, but in which there was a recurring pattern of come the end of the workshop, the course, whatever it was, the delegates, the participants then went home and that was it. There wasn't a way of connecting easily through to them to see what was happening a week later, a month later, 6 months later. And so we thought this is an area that we would need to try and focus on. And people did volunteer some ideas that they tried in the past or had heard of, such as getting participants to write themselves an email that would be opened in 6 months' time, just to remind them of what they thought they might be picking up on and following through on. We thought it might be a bit too easy just to delete that because you'd know what it was when it came into your inbox. Another thought related to that was, well, you could have a mentor, a buddy system in your institution who would in a friendly kind of way come round and knock on your door and say, hey, remember that program that you were on, and we talked about doing this, and how's it going? And we thought that sort of captured the right kind of approach, because it's friendly, it's supportive, it's not menacing. But also it could be built into the appraisal system, building this process into the institutional processes in some way, so that people would get both extrinsic and intrinsic benefits from going on the development programs that they'd been on, because it would be recognized through the appraisal process, as well as hopefully making their job more rewarding and easier and so on. And we thought that really the sort of bottom line of all this was, it's best to try and progress in small steps, to try and do one thing at a time and not try and do too much. So that was the bottom line for us.
One last thing, let's bring you back. Okay.
I got a hold
So-
of that in my head. So much.
We, just to put more in your head, we went quite deep on the kind of ethical debates around what co-design is and how to do it. So we thought it was really important to be considering the issues of power in that co-design process, and acknowledging explicitly in the outset what agendas you're bringing into that co-design conversation in the very, very first place, and being quite transparent as a facilitator on your vulnerabilities and where you're stuck and why it might be problematic from your side, but really giving space for everyone involved in the process to bring their vulnerabilities and their concerns into the conversation in the first place, and actually having a kind of having the group define what effective co-design would look like and what co-design would not look like from their perspectives before you go into co-designing anything. So we sort of, yeah, we went quite deep on the fundamentals before even starting off on the process.
I think I'm going to have to go backwards through these points. So the nature of the co-design process, many of the people we're working with have no concept or experience of co-design of any kind. So you're absolutely right. We have to approach these things very carefully. But the whole point really is to be there to listen and then to do something with what they tell us. Coming back to the point about the power structures and whose concept of impact is it? We try to get at that by having the kinds of follow through from the course itself, where we invite people to give us their emails if they want to contribute to some further survey process. And different platforms have different rules about that, but that means that we can follow up 6 months later to come back to, I think Stephen was raising that sort of point, and we can say, what did you do with all that and how was it? For that, we use Wenger's value creation framework, which has 5 different levels of impact. And in some ways, the most difficult is realized impact, realized value, because that's where you want to see that that has made a difference to what they do. What we can do is get them to report back on, yes, we did use it. And in one of these surveys, we were asking about to what extent have you discussed these ideas with your colleagues? And there are only about 42% who said, yes, we do that. But when we asked, how has this made a difference to the way you think about what you're doing and planning for the future, 94% said it had made a difference. So as an individual, you can think about it, more difficult sometimes to discuss it with your colleagues, which brings us to the point about localization, which was one of the first points made. Because we're talking about both the local and the global here. We're talking about local people, local solutions, local problems and issues. And what we invariably find is that all the people, and there are, you know, people from over 100 different countries in all kinds of contexts, 40% of them from low and middle income countries. So that's a lot of different kinds of contexts being shared there. And the whole point really is to say, to what extent, and we asked this, to what extent would this apply for you? And they can come back on that and say, well, it's very difficult because we don't have the context and our school or our university hasn't got the this kind of strategy. So what can you do as an individual teacher is what it comes down to. And that, I think, addresses some of the points which are being made about university level strategies, policies, and that came up on some of the Padlet wall as well. It is so important for those levels of the organization to own what's going on here. And that's, I think, one of our biggest struggles, is to enable the senior teams in organizations to get this, to understand it, to understand what it could mean. And when you ask, as someone did, how do you get colleagues who are terribly pressed for time to engage with this? Well, people who've got research results want to engage with ways of making sure they have impact. And this is a very good way of making sure they have impact, which you can then show to ESLC or EPSLC or whatever. So there are solutions to all these, but that top level understanding and leadership is so important. And a lot of people have mentioned that. So thank you very much for your ideas. They were great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your participation. It was great to hear all your thoughts on this. And I would like to take this opportunity to present our keynotes with a copy of this fine code book. And I think, can we thank them for their contribution?